Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm your host, Nathan Staples, and this is the place to get your weekly dose of football news and chat from the past 7 days in the world of French football. Before we analyse some of the big talking points from the week that was, here is Eric Devine with the major headlines.
Thank you, Nathan. We had a full slate of action in Ligue 1 this weekend with a big match getting things started on Friday. Monaco hosted Saint-Etienne, and despite Leonardo Jardim putting out a very strong lineup, the match ended up level at 1 each, with goals from Anthony Martial and Melvin Erding. Saturday's afternoon kickoff saw Lyon move provisionally top of the table with a 3-1 victory away to Guingamp, who finished the match with 10 men. In the multiplex, we were treated to goals aplenty. In Lille, Sebastien Corchia, Nolan Roux, and Divock Origi all scored to lead the hosts over Stade de Rome 3-1. Rennes notched an important third win in 5 matches to move into 9th place, beating host Lorient 3-0, while on the south coast, Montpellier scored 3 times, including 2 penalties, inside 3 minutes in the second half, to come from behind in defeating Bastia 3-1. Evian will feel fortunate to have earned a point, as Kevin Gomis's own goal later on allowed the visitors to claim a 2-2 draw at the Allianz Riviera. The other match of the day saw Metz stun Toulouse 3-2 behind a Modibo Maiga hat-trick, leaving both teams still in the bottom 3, but perhaps just giving another chance to Metz's survival hopes. On Sunday, the early match pitted Bordeaux against Lens, and the injury-struck hosts saw the European chances brightened with Nicolas Maurice Ballet's injury-time winner, despite Lens having played well and having a couple penalty shots denied. At the Beaujoire, Caen came from behind to bolster their chances of staying up, winning 2-1 with substitute Thomas Lamar's free kick, the difference deep in stoppage time. And in Le Classique, Jeremy Morel's own goal for Marseille capped an evening of poor defending, serving to negate a stunning first-half race by André Pierre-Gignac, as the hosts fell 3-2, allowing PSG to reclaim top spot. In injury news, all of Serge Aurier, Johan Cabaye, David Luiz, Marquinhos, and Lucas Moura had returned to training for PSG, but Luiz and Thiago Motta left Le Classique injured, reigniting doubt surrounding their ability to balance a congested fixture list. For Lens, things have only gotten worse in the wake of their heartbreaking loss to Bordeaux, with the news that Benjamin Bourigeaud, impressive thus far this season, is likely to miss the end of the campaign, leaving the side that much thinner in central midfield. Marseille, meanwhile, can take heart from the news that star defender Nicolas Nkoulou is now only lacking match fitness and could appear as soon as next weekend against Bordeaux, his return certain to be welcome after conceding 3 yesterday. Closer to the bottom of the table, Evian's Mathieu Duhamel, the side's leading scorer with 8 goals, appears to be unavailable until the end of the month due to a thigh problem. And for Nantes, Georges-Kevin Nkoudou and Kian Hansen both left the club's loss to Caen injured, but neither are expected to be long-term absences. Elsewhere, the big story of the week, Marseille's president Vincent Lebrun has submitted a dozen-page dossier to French football's ethics committee against his Lyon counterpart Jean-Michel Aulas, detailing inflammatory statements that have been made by Aulas over the years, including in the wake of Lyon's draw with PSG on matchday 24. The submission has resulted in a disciplinary hearing being scheduled for March 30th, but that has now been moved to April 14th. Lebrun had said that it is, quote, "It is high time that these comments are stopped and severely sanctioned," unquote. Aulas, who has gained a certain level of infamy owing to his outbursts on Twitter, responded by deriding Lebrun as being, quote, "immensely petty, a young, inexperienced president who should focus on the Classico," end quote. More on this story to come after the rescheduled Classico has taken place. More on this story to come after the rescheduled hearing has taken place. And that's all the news for now. Over to you, Nathan.
And thank you, Eric. And remember, for all your breaking French football news, be sure to check out the Get French Football News website, which is in the description of this video. Now, we open with our first major talking point of the show, and where else could we start but Le Classique? It was a thrilling game at the Stade Velodrome that had plenty of people over the internet wetting their lips. Philip, how good of an advert for Ligue 1 football was this one?
It was very good. It was contrary to all the previous PSG versus Marseille games. The scenario was first of all extremely good. Paris started better. Pasteur missed an early chance, but it was still goalless after half an hour, and people were starting to get unrest. Is this going to be another KG goalless or single goal affair? But then Gignac broke the deadlock, and a good header from a cross. And Marseille really didn't really have much going until their opening goal. Paris equalized via Blaise Matuidi, his first ever goal scored from his right foot, and a really sweet goal the inside of the boot, beat Mandanda in the top corner. It's a really, really great goal. If you haven't seen it, you really must see it. However, just before half-time, Thiago Motta makes the mistake, losing the ball to Romao, who sets up Gignac. Gignac makes it 2-1 to Marseille, to the hosts. Sirigu probably could have done better, but at halftime it was 2-1 to Marseille, and Lyon fans would be extremely glad because they had beaten Guingamp and they were top of the table by halftime. But second half was basically, from my point of view, all PSG. Scored 2 goals via Marquinhos and an own goal from Jérémy Morel. And then they were basically all over Marseille. Marseille tried to equalize at 3-3 right at the death, but couldn't find that equalizer. And the game was a bit soured. I didn't find the referee had a particularly bad game. The game was a bit soured by Andre Ayew red card, not for something he said, but more for his body language towards the referee. So that was a bit of a shame, because the game went quite well. The refereeing decisions were quite good, and this red card after the game were really it really soured a bit of the game. So this was for the game. Great advert for French football. Really one of the best Marseille versus OM versus PSG games in recent history. You had a tactical battle with Bielsa sticking with his guns at 3 at the back, playing 3-4-3, but he couldn't play Imbula, who was a very physical player who was injured, and he had to play a very young player whose name is Mario Lemina, and he was just too inexperienced for this game. Blanc was not such of a problem. He stuck with 4-3-3, and most of the players had a great game. I mean, Matuidi was excellent, Verratti was exceptional. The only 2 players I can remember having not great games were Cavani and Ibrahimovic.
Yeah, it was a really breathtaking affair. In all honesty, Eric, was this a classic for you?
Yes, I mean, the first 50 or 60 minutes were good entertainment, but I think the real issue here was comedy defending on both sides. If you look at all the goals, really, Marquinhos totally losing Gignac for the first goal, and Tweedy having way too much time on the ball, despite, as Philip rightly said, an excellent finish for the equalizer there. A poor pass from Verratti on Gignac's second. The center backs for PSG just really too slow to react, and Marquinhos' equalizer, Romao totally lost him after the free kick there. And the less said about Jeremy Morel's defending on the winner, the better. I think, again, the first half was brilliant. The second half, less so. PSG really could have romped. This could have been 5-2 if they were more clinical in their finishing. As Philip Brentley mentioned, Cavani, Ibrahimovic really looked off the boil. And despite the result, the match really wasn't as close as it could have been on the whole.
Yeah, so Philip, where did Laurent Blanc get this game right? What did he do to win this game against Marseille?
Well, I don't know if it was him or it was the players who just realised that they were losing to a team that at half time, which they really shouldn't be, because PSG had the most chances in the first half, but still conceded 2 goals to André Pierre Gignac, and one was a bad mistake from Thiago Motta, who lost the ball quite deep. So I'm not sure if it's Blanc who changed something. He didn't seem to change anything, but the player really changed the attitude right after the halftime interval. So the first goal of the second half, so the 2-1, came from a free kick, a pretty badly, a very, very poorly hit free kick by Ibrahimovic, who actually slips when he takes it, but he just happens to land on Marquinhos' foot, who equalises, and the second one is an own goal. And once again, PSG really could have scored more, but I think it was more the team saying, okay, we can do much better than this. We're losing 2-1 against Marseille at Marseille, and we can do we can do so much better than this. So Laurent Blanc didn't change any tactics, and I think the players were really a bit mad at themselves for being 2-1 down at half time.
Yeah, and it was a closely fought affair, really, especially in the first half. But for you, Eric, where did Marcelo Bielsa go wrong?
And I wrote an article that's been published on the site earlier today. He insists with playing 3 at the back to get the most out of Mendy and JJ. This formation hasn't worked all season, and especially, as Philip rightly mentioned, without Mbula to play between the 2 wingbacks, this is never going to work. The ability of Mendy and JJ to get forward doesn't outweigh how tired they are later on in the game. And as I said, PSG had been more clinical. This could have been a rout. I think that Bielsa needs to stick with 4-2-3-1, even without N'Koulou. He has Baptiste Alloué, who's played well when he has played. He could use Alloué and Fani centrally, and Lamina and Ramau ahead of them defensively, and you'd have a very solid 4-2-3-1. Morel's a decent left back. This experiment needs to stop. He was constantly out of position, and Fani really didn't do much better. Just a quick stat, out of Marseille's 31 games this season, they've played 10 with 3 at the back, and they've taken 15 points from those matches. They've played 4-2-3-1 in their other 21 matches and have received 42 points. So it's 1.5 points per match versus 2 points per match. Obviously, Nicolas N'Koulou would be important, and he may return as early as this weekend. But even when N'Koulou has played in 3 at the back, they'd used that formation against Lyon at the Gerland earlier in the season. They still lost. There's not a way to make this formation work, no matter what the personnel is. And Bielsa needs to return to 4-2-3-1 if Marseille are going to have any hopes of chasing the title or even retaining their top 3 place. Now with Monaco hot on their heels in 4th.
It's a really excellent point, I think, and well made. And a quick word on Cavani, Eric. He left the field in a bit of a huff at the end.
Yeah, just a really poor match from the Uruguayan. I mean, earlier in the season, his goals in Zlatan Ibrahimovic's absence were really crucial, particularly in Europe. They had a couple of 1-0 wins over Apoel in the Champions League group stage. But he still doesn't look comfortable on the left. I mean, it's not for a lack of effort. He tracks back and tries, but he doesn't seem to have established any real chemistry with Maxwell, and something that's been so important on the opposite side of the field. We can see how well Marquinhos and Verratti have worked together in recent weeks. But in addition to his role as a winger, his finishing, even when he is presented with opportunities, we expect him as a big money center forward to be more clinical with his finishing, and it just seems to have totally left him. We've seen it too much in the recent weeks, and he may be unhappy with Blanc, but he's just not getting it done right now in front of goal, and it was no surprise to see him removed at all.
It's an interesting thing, and it was caught by the cameras very clearly that he was upset. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer in that regard. Let's move on now to our second talking point, which stems from a feature in the popular French sports newspaper L'Équipe last week, who got their journalists to rank Liga presidents from 1 to 20. While it's not clear whether there were specific criteria that the journalists were asked to follow, I'm interested to hear your opinions, Philip and Eric, starting with you, Philip. Which Liga presidents for you are fulfilling their roles most successfully at present?
We'll still have to go with Jean-Michel Aulas of Lyon, of Olympique Lyonnais, who had his era of glory with Lyon winning successive championships in the early 2000s and going actually quite far in the Champions League as well. But after that, he sold a lot of the players to really big teams. And he changed his strategy, and his strategy was, okay, now we're going to invest in the youth academy, and the youth academy gave us Alexandre Lacazette, Nabil Fekir, Rachid Ghezal, Samuel Umtiti, who is going to be sold for a lot of money at some point, maybe not this summer, but the youth development who already gave us back in the days where Lyon were top and undisputedly top, gave us Benzema and Ben Arfa. He just kept at it, and he knows He knows what he's doing, and very vocal person on Twitter as well. He has a bit of a row with Marseille chairman Vincent Labrune. The second one I would like to mention in a successful manner is Nasser Al Khelaifi, who is the chairman of Paris Saint-Germain. So he bought the club when they were severely in debt. The ex-owners of the club Colony Capital did not spend lots of money, and we all know what Al Khelaifi bought to this club. They repaid all the debt. They bought all these stars around, and really great management of the situation. The one thing people are criticizing him for is his management of the historical fans of Paris Saint-Germain, who were extremely vocal, and now as a consequence, the stadium is a bit less vocal now, and people go PSG bring less away fans with them, so that's the downside. But these two do actually stand out, and I'm putting Aulas up top because it's not like he has the kind of wealth that Al Khelaifi has.
Yes, and Aulas has done a great job, I think, and some interesting choices. Eric, who's impressed you this season?
I mean, obviously Aulas. Things were going very wrong earlier this season, at least relatively speaking for Lyon. You had them out of the Europa League and embarrassing losses to Lens and Metz. But the players that he and Bernard Lacombe have brought in have worked out splendidly. They haven't been spending as they had in the past, bringing in Sissoko, Lisandro, Bastos, Gourcuff. They haven't brought in these big money players, but they've rather spent a lot more cannily. You look at the likes of Jallet, Berimo, Bizabac, even Malbranc and Mavemba. They're low-cost, low-risk acquisitions, and they've worked out splendidly. So returning to this low-risk strategy that he had employed to build and develop that 7 consecutive title-winning team in the early 2000s has really worked out well. We saw Lyon really suffer in recent years, being forced to sell off all these stars and their performances struggle, but getting back to basics has really worked well for Aulas, and a recommitment to his vision of youth has really done him well. And with the social media thing, you know, I'd almost like to make the analogy that Aulas in this regard is, you know, taking some of the focus off his squad in this regard. You look at how Jose Mourinho has done similar things. I know he's not a president, but if he can become part of the story, his players are going to feel less pressure. You see similar things in the United States with college basketball. It's a relatively high level of turnover with the players. You know, with Aulas's policy of selling players on, and if the focus can be on him, there'll be less pressure on the players to develop, and likewise on the manager. Louis Nicolin from Montpellier has also been impressive for me. I think that we talk about his intent to put himself forward in a manner similar to Aulas, although with perhaps a little bit more negative controversy. I think what he's done is really impressive. I mean, we saw Montpellier win the title in 2011-12, somewhat of a shock, and we've seen most of the stars of that team, Giroud, Belhanda, Cabella, Henri Berimo, and more depart, but once again, Montpellier are threatening for European places this season, and he's done really well to, like Aulas, bring in canny veteran acquisitions. You look at players like Barrios, who's starting to come good, Kevin Berigo, as well as develop youngsters. I mean, Morgan Sanson played incredibly well for Les Espoirs over the recent international break and is looking like one of the breakout stars in Ligue 1 this season. And I think that despite Nicolin's controversy, he's done incredibly well under difficult financial circumstances, and should also rightly be mentioned, despite his shall we say, controversial off-field antics.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting that you choose Nicolan, who's had problems in the past holding his tongue, especially in an embarrassing incident where he won a prize for working against homophobia, only to be stripped of it a month later after making a homophobic insult on Radio Monte Carlo. Do you think that the on-field results, Eric, make him a little bit more bearable?
I mean, I'm not going to sympathize with Nicolan for these comments, but I do think that, as with Olas, if he can take the pressure off of the manager and the players, that's part of being a good president's job, is to allow the players and the training personnel to do their work, and in a somewhat less harsh media light. I also wanted to mention presidents that have done poorly. I think that Vincent Lebrun of Marseille has been nothing short of a disgrace. First, we had the transfer row with André Pierre Gignac back in November, and now we have the Olas dossier. It's just really unbecoming behavior, but not only his behavior, but his personnel. He let Mathieu Valbuena leave last summer. Seemed like kind of a surprise, but it seems like it's worked out well enough. The club haven't missed him too much, as we can see by their position in the table, but this summer we could have all of Gignac, Andre Ayew, Jeremy Morel, and Rod Fanny looking to leave. And, Batshuayi shows he can be an adequate replacement for Gignac up front. The squad's going to really be lacking in depth next season unless LeBron can make a splash in the transfer market this summer. Steve Mandanda has also made noises about leaving, perhaps for the Premier League. I mean, he'll be 29 this year, and he'll be looking to move on and perhaps, be getting some of those high wages that the Premier League can offer, even from a mid-table side. And also, beyond this, the acquisitions that he made are nothing short of bizarre. Florian Thauvin has been nothing short of a flop. And then he goes and signs two more right wings, Ocampos and Roman Alessandrini on top of that, and then doesn't ever play them. It just doesn't make any sense. Not to mention his other big acquisition this season was Andrea Doria, who seems to have just completely disappeared off the map, and this is just one issue over which he's butted heads with Marcelo Bielsa. There just seems to be a real lack of cohesion at Marseille, and it's down to Lebrun. With the resources and the fan base that this club have, there's no reason Marseille shouldn't be the very least in the Champions League places in France every single year. And with the unsettledness the squad has, that's got to come down to Lebrun.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you make. He's not done favourably, but I think it's time after that one we move on now to another one of our new features, which is the Talent Scout, where one of our panellists pick a player, either from within French football or a French national. We look at their career so far and chat about why he's been so eye-catching. Eric, this week talk to us about Marquinhos.
Thanks, Ethan. Marquinhos' arrival from Roma in the summer of 2013 certainly raised some eyebrows owing to the combination of his hefty price tag, his young age, and relative lack of experience in Europe. Despite his obvious potential, the move smacked of serving merely to placate Thiago Silva and his desire to speak Portuguese on the pitch, and seemed to be borne out by but the lack of Marquinhos' experience seemed to be borne out by Laurent Blanc preferring Alex in the Champions League in the biggest matches, making some question whether he had been worth it. This season, he did fairly well at center back during Silva's early season injury spell, playing alongside David Luiz, but for the present, the youngster's been moved out to right back, where he's really impressed.
And what really impresses you about him at this moment in time?
Well, I think we've got to look at it as somewhat of a surprise here. We never saw him coming as a right back, but owing to the struggles of Aurier and Vanderveer, and Aurier being injured as well, there was a necessary need to develop another right back, and rather than try and sign a player, as PSG had struggled with financial fair play, Blanc opted to move Marquinhos to right back. And we think about Brazilian right backs in the recent past, players like Maicon and Dani Alves come to mind. These diminutive, pacey players that love to get forward but can be somewhat caught out defensively. We look now at Marquinhos, though, and we see a player who seems to be developing along similar lines as his compatriot Danilo, who's just been signed by Real Madrid. But they're both bigger, lankier players who are more generally defensively oriented, sound in the tackle. They're also able to get forward. Marquinhos is still developing in this position, so his crossing isn't we might expect, pardon me, from an offensively oriented right back, but his awareness in terms of knowing when to attack and when to track back is quite impressive. I think his training as a center back has made him a more defensively sound option in that regard. And he's really also, don't think this can be undersold, developed an excellent understanding with Verratti in this position. I'm fairly certain, I'd have to double check on this, but I believe that PSG are undefeated with Marquinhos at right back this season. And that's a pretty impressive statistic. I believe that his start yesterday was his 15th or 16th game in the position.
Yeah, and that. It does seem the hallmark of a young centre-back at the moment. I know from my team, Manchester United, trying it with Phil Jones and Chris Smalling, but also he's still very, very young. What can he still achieve in the game?
Well, for me, I think the jury is still a little bit out in terms of his future positionally. I think he works well as a right back, as I said. And for the foreseeable future, we have to assume that Luiz and Silva will continue to be PSG's central defensive partnership. So his remaining there at right back, that is, makes sense at club level. Internationally, Danilo has been playing really well over the past couple seasons, and I don't think he could push him out at right back. But you have to look, if you look at center back, I think his future for Brazil can allow him to play there internationally, while also simultaneously developing into that position at PSG. Spelling Luiz and Silva in the middle as needs. And this kind of versatility from Marquinhos is going to be really key. PSG don't have the money to bring in these big money signings that they continue to do over the past 3 seasons with financial fair play in place. So the fact that Marquinhos is able to play at right back and at center back will allow Laurent Blanc that much more versatility without the need to go out and buy either of these positions, especially with the figures that have been bandied around for center backs in the recent past. Look at how much Manchester City played for Joaquim Mangala, for example. I think that his blend of composure and at his age and his willingness to try out a new position speak of a player who has a very strong mental outlook and mental attitude. And while he's yet to nail down his position, I think Jones is a great analogy that his willingness to be a team player and work within the bounds of what his manager asks him show that he can really develop and be the kind of leader that PSG will need in the future, particularly with Silva turning 31 later this year and not being around forever.
Yeah, I think it's.
Actually, I have a comment about Marquinhos. If I
feel free.
If I can add to that, we watching the game last night, Marquinhos actually started at right back, and as David Luiz was injured after half an hour, 30 odd minutes, he came off for Van der Wiel, who naturally came at right back, and Marquinhos came to partner Thiago Silva at centre back. So not only did he score the equalising goal, I saw PSG were much more secured and much more confident at the back with Marquinhos partnering Thiago Silva. So he basically shown the whole world that he can be a really good right back and a really good centre back next to Thiago Silva. So definitely one for the future.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how Marquinhos carries on in the future. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Philip, for joining in. And remember, you can use the hashtag GFFN show on Twitter to ask the panel a question tonight, or every night we'll carry on from the weeks ahead and get involved. If you don't agree with something that's been said tonight, let us know. So now let's move on to our third talking point of the night. With the international break only just behind us, one thing that surprised many in Didier Deschamps' squad was the omission of Luca Dean, with Patrice Evra and Benoit Tremoulinas getting the nod instead. My question is, should the Juventus left-back, Patrice Evra, retire from international football to allow the immense amount of emerging French left-back talent to gain more Les Bleus exposure in the run-up to Euro 2016? Eric?
No, I think that Les Bleus aren't an especially young squad, but what they do lack outside of Evra, maybe Bakary Sagna and Karim Benzema, are players who are experienced at the highest level. Pardon me. Regardless of Evra's past problems in the international setup, his experience over the last 10-plus years means that he is looked to as a leader both on and off the pitch. He may not be the attacking force that he once was, but he is still more than solid defensively and capable of doing a job on the biggest stages, as he has proved with Monaco, Manchester United, and now Juventus. Well, there are several prospects coming along. I'm really not convinced by Kurzawa. He's obviously a tremendous talent, but his antics against Sweden for Les Espoirs last year give me a real pause, as does his injury history. Luca Dean has really failed to unseat Maxwell at PSG, and while Jordan Amavi of Nice might be one for the future, I don't think that Deschamps can gamble on any of these three, being under the amount of pressure he is in hosting the Euros in 2016.
I think it's an interesting point, and his experience is pretty invaluable, but there's a plethora of young players behind the former Manchester United man. Do you think it's time for him to step aside, Philip?
Well, probably not retire, but I think France are obviously going to host Euro 2016 in a year and a couple of months. And I think Evra is will be a bit old by then. I mean, he's still having a great season at Juventus. He's still doing his job, doing a really good job in the Champions League, as we saw against Borussia Dortmund. And yes, he has loads and loads of experience, especially in the Champions League, in those really big games. But the fact is, I'm not sure if he'll be fit enough for Euro 2016. That's the main debate. And France have always had quality left backs coming through. I don't think Dean deserves to actually start for France, because he's not even starting for his club. Mind you, he is up against Maxwell, who's a really good left back, possibly one of the best in the league. So that will be good for Dean in the long term. But I would play Kurzawa a little bit more in friendlies, and try and see if Evra will be able to last until Euro 2016.
Well, it's interesting to hear these calls for Evra to retire when, since 2010, with him in the side, Les Bleus have kept a clean sheet 72% of the time. Surely, Eric, this shows why he's worth keeping in the side.
Like I said, Evra's been labeled a troublemaker in the past, as his antics at the World Cup in 2010 showed. He's a bit of a hothead, but all things considered, his evolution is what really impresses me and why he needs to stay with the squad. He's getting older now, but as his age, his style has become a little bit more conservative. He's not the bombing on, attacking left back that we saw maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago at Manchester United. His style's become a little bit more conservative, but it's that's allowed him to remain a key figure for both club and country. His performances at Juventus have demonstrated that, and against Brazil, he was one of the best players on the pitch for Les Bleus. The side even moved away from, and in Juventus, the side moved away from their back three to include him. He's got leadership, and his ability to accept the fact that he's aging and needs to adapt his game really speaks volumes about the mental state that he's in. And we see this often with fullbacks. The players, this isn't a position where players tend to age well. Running up and down, tracking back, attacking in the modern game is so important. But for Evra to adapt his game and just to scale back just that little bit, to become a little bit more of a defensively oriented player, really show that he wants to wants to make up for lost time, really. If we look at how his career internationally sort of got sidetracked in the aftermath of the events of the World Cup in 2010, I think that he really wants to end his France career in Euro 2016 on a positive note. Whether that means a championship for Les Bleus in the tournament or not, I think that's still to be decided, but that Evra wants to kick on and end his France career on a high note.
With all that said, surely the national side has to begin to plan their future without him, Philip?
Yeah, I would still give more game time to Kurzawa, even though he's been a bit of a silly boy with the under-21s, where he basically mocked the Swedes in a playoff, which was quite important, and those actions came back to haunt him. He's still performing week in, week out outstandingly for Monaco, which is where Evra used to play. So probably not start every game, but to include him more and more in the side. So to me, Kurzawa is a one that should get a bit more bit more playing time for France.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that Evra is definitely looking in his rearview mirror at the 3 emerging young left backs ready to take his throne, I think. It's time for another one of our features we like to call the Special Report. Each week, either Eric or Philip will be given a few minutes to talk a little in depth about something we feel needs to be known from within French football. This week, Philip will talk about the Women's Football World Cup bid.
Yes, so women's football in France has come leaps and bounds in the past decade. There was a time where France did not qualify for any Women's World Cup or any Women's European Championships. And a couple of weeks ago, France got the nod to host the 2019 World Cup, so in France. So we've got 2015 coming up in Canada. And France are probably one of the strongest European sides, along with Germany. So of course we've got all the other big sides. We've got Japan, who are the holders, and you've got the United States and Canada, who are really good sides. United States and Germany have the most World Cup titles, which are 2. And France will go there without much pressure, and with the intent of preparing for 4 years later for the World Cup, which will be in France. So that's on the national front. On the international scene, sorry. On the national scene, women's football is really starting to develop and evolve into something really interesting. People are starting to go to games. We had the Champions League quarterfinal between Paris Saint-Germain and Glasgow City, which had attracted a decent crowd in France, which Paris Saint-Germain won the quarterfinal. So Paris Saint-Germain are still in the Champions League. They're going to play Wolfsburg next week. And looking at the history of the Champions League, you've got really since 2007, where Arsenal Ladies FC won the Champions League. It's all been either Germany or France. You had Potsdam, you had Frankfurt, you had Lyon, who won it twice, and France really is blessed with 2 really strong sides for Lyon. We're talking about sides who have scored more than 100 goals in 15 odd games. So they're really great sides. So Lyon are going to win the titles this season, but we've got Paris Saint-Germain, who are going to try and win the Champions League. Would be great for French football in general. And then after this World Cup, there are 4 years of preparing for this major event, and it's going to be a really good boost for the sport.
Well, that's excellent to hear. And hopefully the women's game will begin to prosper just as the men's soon enough. Our 4th talking point this week concerns, we go back to Ligue 1 football and Lyon and their hard-fought victory over Guingamp. It was a potential banana skin, especially with Paris Saint-Germain and Marseille playing a day later. Did they pass this test with flying colours, Eric?
Well, I think after the loss to Nice, and you have injuries to Jallet and Gonalon, I mean, those 2 had played in every single match, except for they were each suspended for 1 due to yellow card accumulation. But they've been the ever-presence in the side, and their experience, especially with most of their teammates being on the younger side, has led to them being, Gonalon is the captain, and Jallet is the captain. And Jallet is an experienced player as well, being really the leaders on the pitch. And with that loss to Nice in the rearview mirror and the pressure that Lyon would have been feeling with Le Classique happening the next day, this could have had prior to the match. This could have been every opportunity for Lyon to slip up. You're going on the road to Guingamp. It's a tough place to play. A determined fan base. Guingamp are an interesting team. They're a more veteran side. They don't really have a lot of younger players. And they've definitely been punching above their weight for most of the last 2 years under Jocelyn Gourvenec, winning the Coupe de France, progressing to the knockout rounds in the Europa League. But, all in all, I felt like Lyon really took to this well. Corentin Tolisso dropped back into going along this holding role, and Steve Malbranc came in for Tolisso on the right, and Lyon kept ticking away the same as they usually do. Lots of short passes, allowed the players to gain confidence. They really played well. And even Mohamedou Dabo, who's a player I've sort of not been a fan of over the past few years as a Lyon fan, even he looked pretty well. Had some good interchanges with Malbranc on the right there as well. I think that, as much as Guingamp didn't take the match to Lyon, the mental fortitude that Lyon showed on the day really says volumes about their potential, their title hopes, and the character of this still mostly young side.
Well, it certainly was a good result, especially playing before their rivals, but was this a little bit of a free swing given Guingamp's current status, Philip?
Yes, because we saw a trend happening throughout the season. Let's remind all our listeners that most of Guingamp's season has been with European football, which has not been the case for basically three quarters of the league. And I think Gourvenec, Guingamp's manager, has done a really great job at keeping the team ticking at home, having a decent home record. But right now, Guingamp have a FA Cup, Coupe de France semi-final to play at Auxerre, who are in Ligue 2, and they really like playing at the Stade de France. Every time they play there, they seem to win, and usually it seems to be against their neighbours Rennes. So it seems they really like to meet in the final. But league-wise, Guingamp are pretty much safe, and not to mention the scenario of the game with the first goal that was pretty much a blooper from Le Seul, the Guingamp goalkeeper, and then you had a penalty who was extremely generous, shall we say, from the referee, and then it's 2-0 down. And then you've got the sending off. So then, if you put yourself in Gourvenec's shoes, it's a bit like saying, okay, well, we lost this one against the league leaders. So yesterday they were the league leaders, but we still got a cup semi, so we can get back to Europa League football next season. So things could be worse. So I think they took this defeat on the chin now, and didn't really worry about it, because they've not really got anything to worry about survival-wise.
Well, even considering that, Eric, we've seen Guingamp beat the bigger teams this season, so has to be seen as a good result.
I'll agree. Guingamp's minds are obviously elsewhere, and that Gourvenec probably got it wrong tactically. Played his usual 4-4-2, but there was no pressure until Lyon were across midfield. And the front two of Mondon and Beauvieux were, out to pasture as well. They weren't really putting in the shift that would have been necessary to disrupt the ball movement that Lyon rely on in midfield. My doubts on this match had more to do with the potential for trouble, rather than what actually happened on the pitch. And in terms of Lyon's title hopes, really gives me some confidence, not only as a fan, but as a fan of the side, but as a fan of the league in general, to have a legitimate challenger to PSG's hegemony.
And as for Guingamp, Philip, another cup success in their sights, potentially?
Well, they're definitely favourites for Tuesday evening against Auxerre, and the other semi-final will be PSG versus Saint-Etienne. So PSG playing a lot of cup games, and actually a lot of games they're still going to play in all competitions. They've got the League Cup final against Bastia next Saturday, and then they have Saint-Etienne, and so if Guingamp beat Auxerre. So it's going to be a big final either way, because it is against Saint-Etienne, who are going to bring a lot of fans, or against Paris, who may bring a few as well. and Guingamp has some kind of aura in this competition. So you just can't rule it out. I mean, I'm pretty sure Saint-Etienne Paris fans, I mean, the ones who wins on Wednesday will be more than happy to meet Auxerre rather than Guingamp, such as their record at the Stade de France.
Yeah, they seem to love the Stade de France a little bit, Guingamp, and good luck to them should they beat Auxerre. Now, here's a section where everyone has an opinion. It's our heroes and villains of the week. Each week, Eric and Philip will pick a hero and a villain of French football, whoever it may be, and explain their reasoning behind their choices. First off, who's your picks for this week, Philip?
So my hero is Blaise Matuidi, who showed us once again that he has 5 lungs. He just ran the whole show from the first minute to the last, picking up free kicks when it mattered. It was just an absolutely outstanding performance from him. As a villain, it's again related to the Classico. André Ayew is my villain. He actually did a lot of complaining. He didn't have a particularly good game from his high standards, I thought, and he kept complaining. He kept complaining to the ref every niggly decision. He wasn't the worst player to referee ever from a referee point of view, but his red card after the game just goes to show what needs to be said about his game, basically. So it was not a good game for him. So he's my villain.
No, and some interesting choices, I think, there. Eric, who makes your list this week?
I think Marimo Maiga is the easy call here. I mean, he's on loan from West Ham, playing for Metz, and we had seen him do pretty well in the league before with Sochaux a few seasons ago, and to get this hat trick in a game that, without any degree of exaggeration, Metz had to win if they wanted to survive. His first goal was a bit of a fluke after a goalmouth scramble, but the second two were really tasty. His second to take the ball just away from Spahic, the Toulouse defender, and the third putting the ball across the face of goal behind Almada, both really composed and brilliant finishes. And if he can continue to play like that, and as he showed in his previous spells in Liga, Metz may have just the smallest chance of staying up in the near future. For villains, I think Bielsa. He, as I mentioned earlier, 3 at the back doesn't work. His loyalties to players who aren't stepping up when they need to are what's holding this Marseille team back. It's not a matter of talent. It's a matter of sticking with these players who aren't showing up on the biggest stages. I know Mendy and JJ are still young, but the reason that he's using the 3-3-3-1 is to allow them to become involved in the attack. And Mendy was all but invisible last night. JJ had a better second half, but really wasn't as involved as he could have been either. And Florian Thauvin, this player came at a high cost, but for me, he's been nothing but a headache for Marseille. He's selfish. He shoots too much. I mean, there was one quote-unquote shot that seemed to be a lob that was 6 yards ahead of Gignac. I'm not sure how he gets a place every week. I believe he started in 29 out of 31 matches, but based on what? I'm not seeing it. And if Bielsa can't demonstrate more flexibility in terms of A, going back to a 4-2-3-1, and B, dropping Thauvin, I think that with the form that Monaco are in, they're easily going to be able to overtake Marseille, and it's going to be down to the manager. He's got to shape up, and he's got to look at the big picture and see that these players aren't performing to the standards they need to be a top 3 challenger, to say nothing of the title. And again, I agree with you, Philip. I didn't have his best game, but regardless of, and he had been being a little bit too much chippy and could have perhaps been sent off he didn't get a yellow card for a challenge very early on in the match, and so his first yellow could have been his second. But throughout the season, Ayu's really been the leader among the outfield players. Tracks back, has lots of energy, doesn't hesitate to get involved, tracking back and going forward, drifts inside, comes wide, does what needs to be done for the team. So regardless of him not having the best day, you're not going to improve his mood by taking him off, especially as Tovan should have been the one to come off first.
You see, that's why I picked him, because he's one of the most experienced players of this Marseille squad, and he needed to deliver last night. I mean, he didn't have the worst game in the world. I mean, I can pick easily 6 other Marseille players who had poorer games than him, but he really should be showing the example. He has a smaller, a younger brother named Jordan, who plays at Sochaux, and he exactly had the type of games that his brother had at Marseille before he was sold. And I don't know, Andre to me has always been let's say the more intelligent player, not doing anything stupid, be it for club or country, for Ghana as well. He's been really good. But in those types of games, I mean, last night it was a massive game. Both sides going for the title. The hysteria and the media build-up around the game was massive, and I think Marseille needed a bigger Andre Ayew.
I think. Sorry, carry on, Eric. If you're going to make a rebuttal.
No, I was just going to say that outside of Payet and Gignac, who on Marseille did have a good game? Ayew lost his head. I'll agree with you on that, but the result was down to the tactics, not to Ayew's performance. I mean, Marseille have been challenging for the title all season, and you look at what they've gotten out of Florian Thauvin. A team can afford to have an off night from one player, but if you have a lack of a holistic understanding of the situation to the degree that Bielsa has demonstrated by continuing to want to involve Mendy into JJ and Thauvin, it's not going to work for Le Phocéens. It's just not. And again, Ayew should show more leadership. I know he's not the captain, but among the outfield players, he's definitely looked at as the leader. But it's more down to Bielsa for me.
Yeah, I think I'll cut that one there. It's interesting. It's good to hear a good bit of debate. That's what this section's for, isn't it? But a lot of information for El Loco to chew on there as well, Eric. Thank you very much. We move on now to our final talking point of the week, and it comes from Friday night's encounter between Monaco and Saint-Etienne. The Principality have to be disappointed with a draw against an understrength Les Verts, who also have an eye on their midweek Coupe de France semi-final against Paris Saint-Germain. Philip, was this a bad Monaco or a good Saint-Etienne?
It was a good Saint-Etienne. They had a really bad spell a couple of weeks ago, actually a month ago. But they were missing a few players. So there was Amouma who was missing, Gradel as well. Gradel who's a speedy winger from Ivory Coast who has a lot of pace. But they kept Monaco at bay. One would argue that it hasn't been too hard in the league. But Monaco have been putting out the results, and they actually stayed at 0-0 at half time, and the deadlock was actually broken by Saint-Etienne, who scored from a really great header from ex-PSG striker Melville Erding, and they didn't really concede that many chances from Monaco, who are in the Champions League and who are above them in the league. So the defending was really good. The midfield did a lot of pressing, and they scored a great goal. So I mean, Saint-Etienne were definitely not easy to beat on Friday evening.
Well, Monaco have been on a terrific one that's even got themselves into the title discussion. But is this an opportunity missed in the end, Derek?
I mean, I agree with Philip there on the fact that Saint-Etienne have been hard to break down. They have been all season. And lacking Gradel and Hamouma going forward, they were never going to be a threat to score. But you look at the team that Jardines put out. This is his first choice full strength 11, and they failed to develop any chances out of that, and it just really, I think, speaks to Jardim's lack of ability to establish some sort of fluency going forward. They got sucked down into a nasty, chippy game, 39 fouls in the game. And Saint-Etienne are obviously going to be looking ahead to the Coupe de France semifinals. It just really showed a lack of focus on Monaco's part. You know, a win here, I believe, would have taken them to within a point of Marseille prior to Le Classique. And yeah, an opportunity lost for Monaco. They can be as defensively solid as they like, and again, you know, Erding's goal is down to his skill, not necessarily a lack of defensive ability by Monaco, but without the ability to put the ball in the back of the net, as they've been doing in recent weeks, Monaco may see their top three hopes slip away a little bit here.
Well, we shouldn't take too much away from Saint-Etienne, who've been a thorn in many people's sides this season. Are they certainties now for Europe for you, Philip?
Definitely. Definitely, because first of all, if they win on Wednesday against PSG, they've got a pretty easy cup final on paper, but you know, it may be against Guingamp, so that's never easy. And if PSG win against Bastia next Saturday, which is the League Cup, fifth becomes directly fifth basically guarantees you a Europa League playoff. But Saint-Etienne have already had a history with not doing too well in the Europa League. It wasn't great to watch this season, and it's sometimes they got knocked out in the playoff by some minnows. So it wasn't. It's not always as a best choice. But if PSG win the League Cup, they're definitely going to Europe. I can see Bordeaux overtaking them because there's only 2 points clear of Bordeaux, but they've got a goal difference there so much better. So I can't see Saint-Etienne finishing lower than 6, and so for those reasons, I think they'll be in playing European football next season.
And is this a hammer blow to any chance of Monaco really stealing the title from underneath their rivals' noses, Eric?
Not quite yet. PSG have fixture congestion. I don't think Lyon are out of the woods by any means in terms of their injury problems. And in addition to their game in hand, Monaco do still have to play Marseille. I wouldn't count them out quite yet. Aside from the match against Marseille, their run-in is laughably easy. I think aside from the postponed match against Montpellier, their other matches are all against teams in the bottom side of the table. But if they can't find the back of the net in a way that they had similar to the problems that they had on Friday, their chances are going to really drift. They really need to be taking, I would say, something in the neighborhood of 16, 17, 18 points over the remaining matches to even have a chance, despite the obstacles that Lyon, Marseille, and PSG are also facing.
The goal difference is going to be really detrimental to Monaco if they want to enter the top 3. If you look at their goal difference, they're really
yeah,
very, very far from the other 3.
Yeah, they've struggled to score goals all season, and I think that might just stop them from going for a march. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us live on YouTube and those listening afterwards. Tune in next week for another episode of the Get French Football News Show. Feel free to follow us on Twitter at the GFFN Show, and we shall see you next week. Goodbye.